The way you measure your marketing in B2B growth will shape the way that you strategize and execute your campaigns. So, if you're optimizing towards the wrong metrics, then that creates compounding, often invisible damage to the company month by month. So it's so important that you get your measurement right. You're measuring the right things, optimizing for the right things. If you get lots of leads in your marketing, but your sales is unable to convert those leads into revenue, it's a very common problem in B2B marketing programs especially, then this video will show you how to diagnose the problem and then how to measure properly so you can avoid those issues. So we'll go through first how not to measure, and then I'll take you through an example of a really crystal clear way to measure your B2B marketing growth. So first, how not to measure. So you shouldn't be measuring cost per lead, or you shouldn't be measuring conversions. So it's quite common in marketing, in B2B especially, for marketers to present a automated report, and it shows lots of different rows of data, lots of different ads, and how many conversions came out of each ad. But the problem is when you're measuring cost per conversion or cost per lead like this, then the advertising algorithm will automatically optimize for cheaper and cheaper leads. That sounds good, right? But the cheaper leads are the lower quality leads. So in B2B, you're looking to speak to those higher value decision makers, but it's more expensive to put content in front of them. So if you're optimizing towards cheaper and cheaper leads, then the algorithm will naturally just put your content in front of the lower value people more and more. And then as they come into your sales cycle and then as they filter into your business, obviously that causes a lot of hard work and damage. The problem is when that's what you're measuring, your marketers will also unconsciously optimize towards a cheaper cost per lead, or how can I just bring in more and more leads so that they can make their metrics look better. It's the same thing with clicks and followers, for example. So in B2B marketing, there's often an inverse relationship between cost per click or even followers. So if you're producing great marketing, then it's speaking to the exact right decision makers, but it's also repelling the wrong type of audience, the type of audience that perhaps can't afford your services or aren't sophisticated enough. So if it's repelling that proportion of the audience, which is most of them, then your cost per click will naturally increase. It will naturally go higher. Same thing with followers. You won't have as many followers if you're speaking to the exact right audience, but you'll have more of the right type of audience. The problem is these types of metrics, cost per lead, cost per click, followers, are also easier for marketers to hack. And so when you're measuring them based on those metrics, then they will optimize towards more shallow content, more shorter content, more fun content, more clickbait, because that naturally increases all of those metrics, even though it brings significantly lower value pipeline into your business. The other measurement mistake, automated attribution tools or data directly from the platform. So B2B buyers' journeys these days are much more complex than someone seeing an ad, clicking and passing through a landing page and converting as a lead. But automated attribution tools will only measure that last part of the journey. They don't measure all of the video views, all of the conversations in the boardroom, all of the thought leadership they consumed, all that sort of thing. It actually presents the exact wrong data because it'll only present that last click, which is typically a Google search for your brand or going through the website and hitting the contact page. And so then you start to overinvest in Google or overinvest in things that aren't actually creating that impact. So all of those are great marketers' metrics. So the marketers, they should be looking at cost per lead, they should be looking at conversions, they should be looking at clicks and followers, all that sort of thing. They should have automated attribution tools because they give indications if you know how to interpret that data. But that should not be the reporting that's presented, because if the executives are making decisions based on that data, it's often the exact wrong decision being made. Okay, so let's talk about why is this happening. Marketers are very intelligent. They're at the forefront of every business generally. Why are we getting the measurement so wrong? It's because maybe 5 to 10 years ago, things were much simpler. There was a time where you could say, okay, I need this many clicks, and if I have that many clicks, then I get this many people to the landing page, and then this many people will sign through the landing page, and then this many people will close into deals. And so you could correlate, if I can get this many clicks, then I have this much revenue, then I will retire to the Bahamas in this much time. It was a great time of digital marketing, but that's not the case anymore. There is no correlation between clicks and sales anymore, but marketers that perhaps aren't as experienced in B2B specifically are still reporting that way. The other thing is when you're marketing to consumers, so what we call B2C marketing, often those types of metrics are correct. So conversions are correct. Cost per click is correct. Because when you're marketing to consumers, let's say you're selling yoga pants on the news feed, for someone to convert in that campaign, they have to put their credit card in and become a sale. And so the algorithm is able to optimize towards people that put their credit card in. So you reduce that brand damage of bringing in lower and lower quality people because the people actually have to put their credit card in to buy. Whereas in B2B, you have that long sales cycle, so the quality of the lead matters exponentially. In fact, it's arguably the most important part of a B2B growth program. So when you're not experienced with B2B marketing, you tend to measure the wrong metrics, cost per click, conversions, cost per lead, all that sort of thing. You tend to optimize towards those incorrect metrics, and that then creates that typical sort of, so many leads coming through, marketing thinks they're doing a great job, but sales is unable to close them. Okay, so best way to show you the optimal way to measure really clearly is to go through an example. So let's bring up the screen here. So I'm going to take you through a simple example, reasonably typical in the B2B space. So first thing, we've got a 6-month B2B growth vision here. So that's really key, especially when you're starting out in marketing. You want to have goals in short bursts, especially if you're entering an agreement with a marketing agency. Ideally, you want to come up with a 6-month project first so that you're not too committed. You can develop a bit of trust, make sure you work together, make sure they know what they're doing, and then you can develop the next phase of the project. I personally think 6-month sprints is the best way to do it so that you're not locked into a retainer, because when you're in a marketing retainer, the marketing team's incentivized to do the least amount of hours possible, so you lose a little bit of luster in the campaign. So we've got a 6-month B2B growth vision here. First thing, the target, how many new customers that we need to bring in. So notice it's not how many leads do we need, it's not how many MQLs, anything silly like that. You want to align the whole team on a goal that's bringing in 10 new customers. Now, this is a significantly harder goal for your marketers to work towards. So you'll notice that the significant majority of marketers essentially won't set a goal like that because it involves a lot more expertise. It requires a lot more experience to generate real customers instead of just generating leads. So we've got a new customers target that puts everyone on the same page. There's no hiding. Everyone knows the goal. This is also key, average deal value. So here in this example, we're saying 100K, but it's so important that you're measuring your average deal value or maybe even your initial annual subscription revenue, because if you don't have this measured, then the advertising algorithms will naturally optimize for cheaper and cheaper leads. And so your marketers often unconsciously will start bringing in lower value customers into the business. But when you're measuring your average deal value, you know that, okay, we've got a vision for 100K average deal value, then you can start seeing that appear in real time in the CRM. Your marketers will know instantly, okay, these aren't the right type of deals, something's wrong. So really important that you're measuring average deal value. Another one so important, customer lifetime value. So you want to understand on average how much do your customers spend with you, because in B2B, the majority of the customer lifetime value often comes after that initial sale is made. And so when you bring in 10 customers, you're not bringing in 10 100K deals, you're bringing in 10 times that average customer lifetime value into the business. So in this example, it's 3 mil. So if you attract 10 customers during that 6-month growth campaign, you're actually bringing 3 mil into your business. That's really key, because if your competitors have experienced marketers who have done these calculations, they will be prepared to invest more in ad spend to attract a customer, because they know that they'll get that amount back over a certain amount of years. And so they will outspend you in the advertising auction, and then over the long term, they also end up making more revenue than you as well. So really important that you're measuring your average customer lifetime value, and then we know, okay, cool, 3 mil is the target for this 6-month growth vision. Of course, your executives will understand that, yes, it might take a few years for us to realize that revenue. So now we've got a growth vision, so now we can work out the campaign economics required to achieve that. So the next thing, we're saying how many qualified conversations is required per closed sale. So a couple of things to notice here. Notice how we're not measuring cost per lead, because when you measure cost per lead, as we said, it's easy for your marketers to hack that metric, bring in lower and lower quality leads to make the numbers look good. We're talking about qualified conversations. So it has to be a lead that comes in. The sales team has to speak to that lead, and then they have to mark them in the CRM as qualified. So now you have that magical alignment finally of marketing and sales working towards that same KPI of qualified conversations. It's not just marketing bringing in leads, it's marketing bringing in the lead, sales talking to them and marking them as qualified. As a team, you can now start saying, okay, what we're looking to achieve is qualified conversations. The marketers are bringing in poor quality leads. They can't blame sales anymore because the measurement is qualified conversations. But what will happen is when you're measuring this, your marketers will naturally up their game. They'll naturally optimize towards the type of strategies that are creating qualified conversations, not cheap leads. That's really key. So if we're targeting 10 new customers, we're saying 5 qualified conversations required per closed sale. So that's your sales close rate. Then we know we have to buy 50 qualified conversations to achieve that target. So we've got a really good marketing goal here now. So as you're running your marketing, now you've got a measuring stick to measure. So you'll know in the first month whether it's working or not, whether you have to change strategies, whether you're over the target, all that sort of thing. No guesswork, really clear. Next thing is cost per qualified conversation target. So you're gonna have to spend a certain amount of ad spend attracting those qualified conversations. Now, this is going to be a guesstimate. You're estimating how much ad spend you'll need to put onto the platform, how much content you need to show to attract one qualified conversation. Now, this requires experience. You need to work with an experienced B2B practitioner that has advertised in your industry to a very similar audience. They will then have case studies and data to be able to make that estimate. So now we know that if we need 50 qualified conversations, if we're guesstimating $900 cost per qualified conversation in ad spend, we're going to need to spend $45,000 in ad spend over that 6-month campaign to achieve that 10 new customers target. Great. So that gives us a sort of daily ad spend target now. Next, if you're building a 6-month campaign, if you're working with experienced practitioners, chances are they're going to want to be building polished content, so some high quality video content, some long form thought leadership content, advertising on multiple platforms, retargeting. They're going to want to set up a measurement modality in your CRM to measure these types of metrics. Of course, you're either going to have a very experienced marketer in your team that will cost in salary, or you're going to have to hire an agency like ours or a fractional CMO or an outsourced team or whatever it is. So you have to include that in your total campaign cost. Everyone will be different. In this example, it's $40K over the 6 months. So now we can see that this total spend on the campaign is $85K. For that $85K total spend, we're going to achieve $1 million in revenue in that first lot of deals or that first year from those 10 customers. And then we're going to achieve $3 million in lifetime revenue. So you can see in that first batch of deals, there's more than a 10x ROI, which is quite standard for a B2B high ticket campaign. And then there's a 30x plus ROI over the lifetime. These aren't exaggerated results. This is quite typical, mainly because in B2B, if you've got a high ticket offer, typically you've already got some really goodwill built around the business. There's already prospects that are ready to buy if they start seeing high value content, all that sort of thing. So you've already built a lot of value in a high ticket business. So now you can start measuring the ROI. Now, what's really good about this is as you're advertising, you might find that actually the projections were a little bit too confident and actually it's costing us double to attract a qualified conversation. So now you can plug that in and you know that, okay, even if we continue at that rate, the ROI is about 6x in that first batch of deals, which is okay, but it's about 20x over the lifetime value. So even if it's not going to plan, you know that you should continue your advertising that way. It works the other way. What happens if you're unexpectedly going amazing? That actually happens more often than the campaign failing because you're being very conservative in your numbers here. But let's say it costs only $350 for a qualified conversation. Now you instantly know that, oh my God, we should be scaling. While the going's good, we should be doubling down on our ad spend. Maybe that Bahamas retirement is quicker than we thought. But again, if you're not measuring this properly, then you don't have that clarity. You don't know. We'll do another example. Let's say actually it's taking 10 qualified conversations for the sales team to close. So at least we still have the assurance that, okay, the campaign's working well. But the beautiful thing is now we can work out where should the whole team focus their energy, their attention, their budget on improving results. So if we feel like the best opportunity is that we can improve that sales close rate, if you're bringing qualified conversations, you should be able to close 1 in 4, 1 in 3 even. In that case, the sales team knows that they need some training, but the marketing team can also create great retargeting content so that anyone who's hitting that sales cycle starts seeing more frequent content to help the sales team. So rather than just blindly trying to get more and more leads, maybe marketing invests some of their budget in helping the sales team there, that sort of thing. Now, these are all real-time figures. So if you've got this set up in the CRM, you can measure this on a weekly basis. You can work out where's the number one bottleneck that everyone should focus their limited energy, attention, budget to improve the overall goal of the campaign. You can see how powerful that gets when you have the right measurements. It's very clear. So you don't need your marketers to do this sort of marketing agency mental acrobatics where they try to justify figures that in your gut don't seem right. There is no issue with the sales team unable to close the leads that marketing are bringing. If the sales team isn't able to close the leads, then it means that the leads aren't good enough, quite common in marketing. So it means that rather than your marketers trying to get the cheapest cost per lead possible, maybe they actually double the cost per lead by showing higher quality content to a much more targeted audience, that sort of thing. So it's very easy to diagnose issues with the campaign. And most importantly, you have clarity on how your B2B business growth program is working. So I hope that helps. It's not a difficult framework to set up. It should be set up in the CRM. A really skilled sort of experienced marketer will be able to set that up for you. Once you've got this set up, everything almost naturally optimizes for you, because when you have clarity on where the biggest issue is, then your marketing team or your sales team, often the smartest people in the business, they will naturally be able to optimize towards getting you the right results. Hope that helps.